So, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, here from New York, the headquarters of the United Nations, for today's session. The session entitled Regional Cooperation as a Key to Accelerate SDG 6 Implementation. The Danube Water Program as a lighthouse example to improve water and sanitation services in the Danube region. I also welcome those of you who are joining us remotely. The session is streamed and recorded, and we are happy to welcome those who are watching us around the world in this session, and regards here from New York City. I have a distinguished panel with me to introduce to you the Danube Water Program and the activities related to this area, to the various countries. And just for the housekeeping of this session, I'd like to let you know that we will have two parts of this session. First is the side event introducing the Danube Water Program and the regional cooperation in the Danube. And in the second part, we will have a panel discussion here on the panel with the participants, and also seeing whether we have some input or questions to be answered from our audience. For the opening statement, I'd like to welcome here on the panel Mr. Norbert Tocznik, Federal Minister of Agriculture, Forestry, Regions and Water Management from the Republic of Austria. Minister, please, your opening statement.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Dear President, the Head of Secretary, dear representative of World Bank, dear representatives of Albanian Water Supply and Sewerage Association and Aquasan Network, Bosnia and Herzegovina, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. Austrian are early birds, so naturally, what better way to start the day than by sharing best practices on regional water cooperation to accelerate SDG 6 implementation. Over the past 2 days, we almost exclusively spoke about delivering on SDG 6 and on how to do it. This morning, I'm humbled by the opportunity to present an initiative that has successfully been implemented 10 years ago, so even before the creation of the 2030 Agenda. This is by the Republic of Austria, in close cooperation with the World Bank, the International Association of Water Services Companies, in the Danube River catchment area, the Albanian Water Supply and Sewerage Association, and the Aquasan Network, Bosnia and Herzegovina, wishes to present the lighthouse example of the Danube Water Program today. We believe that cross-sectoral and interregional cooperation are key. Historically, Austria has a strong relationship with the Danube region and aims to create a mutually beneficial environment by supporting the Danube countries in the course of the EU accession process. Consequently, supporting Albania as well as Bosnia and Herzegovina in advancing their water policy and management is clearly a priority for us. Therefore, Austria is financing the Danube Water Program, a lighthouse example for a regional advisory and capacity building initiative. Established in 2013, EAWD and the World Bank jointly implemented the program to ensure strong utilities, smart policies, and sustainable services in the Danube region. In this context, I am proud that this year the Austrian-based organization IAWD celebrates its 30th anniversary of cooperation with the region's water service sector to ensure sustainable service delivery. In the case of Austria, water has put us closer together with our regional neighbors through cross-country cooperation in international river programs. Given the success story, Austria is fully committed to further support the Danube Water Program in the upcoming years. We also made this commitment in the Water Action Agenda. We stand ready to join hands and support this important initiative to ensure safe and universal access to water services for the entire Danube region. It is my sincere hope that these discussions and deliberations at this side event can create further momentum to truly deliver on the 2030 agenda. With this, I wish you an informative event and fruitful discussions. Thank you.
Excellency, many thanks for your opening statement, and also thanks for looking forward, not just looking back what has been achieved, but also giving a clear statement on the path forward which we have to face. I'm now switching into my second position here for this meeting. I also need to introduce myself as the president of IEWD, and I'm now happy to give you a first introduction on the development of IEWD. When we talk about the work of IEWD, we need to switch back to the last 30 years. And this is a journey to European history as it happened from the beginning of the 90s, and is going through 3 decades of very interesting development politically, but also for the water sector in Southeast Europe, but also for Europe itself. Next. So let me just first introduce who are we. We were founded in the year 1993. This was the time where the Iron Curtain raised, and in the context of this development, suddenly all the weak linkages which we had with our colleagues, with the countries behind the Iron Curtain, were now able to be established more strongly. And the aim was that the water sector has to raise activities in this new area. Suddenly, Austria himself saw it that we are suddenly in the center of Europe, beside having the feeling close to the Iron Curtain that Austria was having the feeling of being the backyard in Europe, only looking to west and to a wall in the east. So this significant change of history brought us into the middle of the development of Europe in this region, and we had to identify that 14 countries were prepared to join us in the work for uniting the water sector, in particular the water utilities in this region. Next. So this was the implication. At this time, in '89, the Iron Curtain was falling down, and we removed fences. It's a bit weird to see today that fences are coming up again, but this is a history of 30 years. At this time, we were tearing down, and politicians helped us to tear down the fences, and you see on the map how much this Iron Curtain divided Europe into 2 parts, including also former Yugoslavia as a country which was not part of the Warsaw Pact. But this was the challenge which we had to face. Suddenly, this Iron Curtain raised. Next. So what had happened is that water experts come together, and politicians took activity, giving us clear targets in saying, you need to establish cooperation within this area of Europe. This was not only the water sector. There has been many fields where cooperation was established. Water sector was only one of them. This was not the time of social media. This was not the time of internet. This was the time of meetings. You came together, you had a proclamation, you signed a paper, you went home to your office and start working. So definitely different circumstances, but this was the time where we founded IWD. And please remember, in the year 93, Austria was not even member of the European Union, and the extension of the European Union towards the Danube region, towards the east of Europe, was the significant movement we had to prepare and face in the 90s. Next. So the 90s were the activity where we had to go to the region. We had several meetings, small symposiums, gathering with experts, and we had the story of former Yugoslavia falling apart and having a civil war which we need to deal with. So also the result of bombings and fightings which affected the environmental condition of the river was an issue we had to deal with. So it was a really significant, not only interesting, sometimes heartbreaking time to see those various things going on. It was based on really getting this cooperation going mainly in personal meetings and carried from personalities which were able to grow this activity of IWD. Next. Well, then we faced the millennium. Austria was part of the European Union, and we were able to guide other countries in their preparation of being applicants for the European Union. And after the year 2000, it was already clear that the extension of the European Union, which means legislation is put in place, regulations are in place in those various countries. This big change of policy in the Danube region happened, and Austria was one of the main drivers of these cooperations and this support for other countries, as we were young in the European Union as well. So we were able to share these experiences. One of the highlights of the next 10 years after the millennium was the IWA World Water Conference in 2008. The preparation took us 6 years, but it helped us to unite the water sector. Suddenly, we were seen from the world perspective, from 5,000 delegates coming to Vienna to participate in the conference. We were seen as the Danube region, not the former East Bloc countries. It was the Danube region which was on the scene, and this was really the game changer for the water sector in this area. Next. So after delivering the World Water Congress, we had another 10 years ahead of us. But what had happened? With the World Congress, it was not only the water experts themselves, several institutions were recognizing the importance and the potential of a small association called IWD. IWD was the partner of IWA in creating the World Water Congress, but suddenly we were also identified by the World Bank as a partner to be grown to establish the Danube Water Program. And the Danube Water Program was introduced at the beginning of 2010 in Washington, D.C. To the World Bank. It took us 2 years to develop that. And let me just recall the first message which we had when we introduced the idea of the Danube Water Program to the World Bank. It was the challenge which we have in the Danube region to deal with various languages, with smaller countries, with different economic background in these countries. Each of these countries has their own story to be told on the water sector. They had their own policy decision-making processes. Some of them in the Danube region are already part of the European Union. Some of the Balkan countries still heading forward to be identified as applicant for the European Union, so on the way forward to join the European Union. This is where we are with the Danube Water Program when we started. Continuing this session here, we want to tell you about this story, about these last 10 years and what had happened over this time in capacity building, because we thought that capacity building, coming down to those people who are working in the utilities to deliver for the water sector, to make things happen beside the policy, which need to be in parallel, well maintained to develop the sector. This was the aim, that the capacity building is something which we need to really focus on. Next slide. And with that, I would like to thank you for your attention. It was a quick look over 30 years of development, just to set the scene and give you an understanding of where we are when we look back to the Danube Water Program activities over the last 10 years. With that, I thank for your attention, and I switch back my head to the moderator's role. And I would like to introduce as the next speaker Raimund Meyer from the World Bank. Raimund Meyer is the Danube Water Program coordinator from Component 1 of the World Bank. For your understanding, the World Bank is governed by the World Bank and IWD jointly. So we will have two speakers introducing to you the Danube Water Program development. Raimund, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Walt, and good morning to everyone, to all the early birds, but the early bird catches the worm, so I hope it's a nice worm for you today, and thanks for getting up early, and we hope really this is an interesting session for you. Let me start with a sincere thanks to the Austrian Federal Ministry for the organization of this side event and kind invitation also to share some of our experiences over the last plenty of years on our work on water sector strengthening activities in the Danube region. The title of the side event is Regional Cooperation as a Key to Accelerate SDG 6 Implementation. And maybe two brief points for clarification in the beginning. First, while regional cooperation is a key feature of the Danube Water Program, in fact, we are dealing with interventions and activities at multiple levels, including regional activities, national activities, and also local activities. I'd like to highlight this because the interplay of the work of these different actors to strengthen the water sector and to deliver water services is a very important element. And second, also, I'd like to briefly outline and touch upon the work of the Danube Water Program on water supply and sanitation. However, the program has evolved. We're in the meantime dealing with the broader water agenda, also with water security. But I would like to highlight also that there are other key actors in the Danube region which foster regional cooperation, in particular the Danube River Basin Commission, the ICPDR, and also the Sava River Basin Commission, who are working on integrated water resource management in the region. So with this intervention, I'm rather focusing a little bit on the history and also on the work on water supply and sanitation. Next slide, please. But first, some brief facts about the Danube region. As you probably know, it's located in Southeast Europe. In the basin, around 80 million people are living. In the broader region, 130 million. The basin is comprising 19 countries, what makes the Danube the most international river basin in the world. It's a very diverse river basin. We have EU countries and non-EU member states in the basin. And to highlight, there are quite significant socio-economic disparities between the countries. The poorest country in the region has a GDP per capita which is only 1/10 the figure of the wealthiest country in the region. And this is an important element because this results also in disparities regarding water-related challenges and also possibilities for countries to overcome also these challenges. Next slide, please. Now, what are some of the issues which we see in the Danube Basin? On one hand, I think that's really the positive message. We see over the last decade significant progress. Over the last 15 years, approximately more than 28 billion euros have been invested, for instance, in wastewater infrastructure, mainly in the EU countries. and access to water services has overall improved, and the pollution of the ecosystems is also decreasing in the region. However, on the other hand, we also see significant regional differences in the status of water services provision. An estimated roughly 20 million people in the broader region are still lacking access to safe water supply and sanitation services, predominantly also in the rural areas. And these regional disparities are also here illustrated on this map as an example for the status of wastewater treatment, which was kindly taken from the International Danube River Basin Management Plan. When it comes to service sustainability, the challenges include a remaining lack of capital investments to increase the overall access to services, but also particularly a lack of operation and maintenance of the existing infrastructure. For instance, typical figures for non-revenue water in a number of countries of the Western Balkans is around 60%, what means that approximately 60% of the water which is abstracted is either lost because of a leaky infrastructure or not accounted for, what can lead to issues when it comes to the financial sustainability of the water utilities in the region. Next slide, please. Now, why is that the case? I'd like to cite here a quote from Paul Rake from the Water Research Institute, which points out, I think, one important issue. And the quote is, how governments respond to a water crisis, maintain their water infrastructure and regulate users can be just as threatening to water security as a flood or a drought. What we see is that some of these governance challenges are often quite common between countries in the region and appear on multiple levels. We see that quite often when we have conversations with water sector institutions. We see that there's quite weak financial and institutional capacity. The water sector institutions are often not well financed and are lacking in sufficient number and quality of staffing. We often see that there's overlapping and unclear roles on responsibilities, and if several institutions are responsible, then basically no one feels really responsible, meaning that reform processes are often stuck. Intergovernmental coordination is also an issue often. We often see unrealistic policies, reforms, and financing strategies. We see that strategies can quite often be very ambitious, but the follow-up actions to implement these strategies are often lagging behind. And sometimes also, to some extent, the limited performance oversight and reporting can also be an issue. This is an important point for accountability. Although I have to say we see quite significant progress on this important point, because in many countries performance indicator data collection systems and benchmarking systems have been established over the past years, also with support from the Danube Water Program. Next slide, please. Hence, there was and there is still a remaining need to strengthen the water sector in the Danube region. And that is also the main objective of the Danube Water Program, which was launched 10 years ago. So we're celebrating this year the 10th anniversary. The main donor is the Austrian Ministry of Finance of the program since 10 years already, and we just launched a new phase. So we will continue with the work over the next years. It's a regional program covering 16 countries with 11 target countries and 5 participating countries. And target countries are financially benefiting from the program. The objective, as I mentioned, is supporting the water sector in the region. And the main implementers are 2 entities. It's the World Bank with activities which the World Bank is directly executing, together with IWD, which Walter already introduced, which is the umbrella association of the water utility industry in the region. And activities are implemented not only by these 2 institutions, but in partnership with a number of sectorial institutions from the region, including ministries in the countries, including national utility associations. We also work together closely with regulators in the region, but also with river basin organizations. Next slide, please. Now, what are the key activities under the program? We have around 3 to 4 big buckets, as we call them, of activities which are implemented. This includes, on one hand, analytical and advisory services, which are directly implemented by the World Bank. This includes, for instance, studies on the state of the water supply and sanitation sector, and more recently also more broadly on water security. This analytical work, these studies are very important for the discussion processes with governments and decision makers when it comes to the needs for reform agenda. So it's important to have this evidence base. Then what we also provide are advisory services, which include, for instance, support for the establishment and work of regulatory bodies, the development of tariff setting methodologies, the development of investment strategies also for the sector, or also in some countries support for utility aggregation processes, so broadly reform agendas for the water sector in the region. And this direct support to countries has also led to several investment operations in the course of this exchange with the decision makers. Other important areas of work include support for the establishment of performance indicator, data collection and benchmarking systems. And we have quite a focus also on regional knowledge sharing activities, which are led by our partner organization, IAWD, including the Danube Water Conference, but more recently also online events, webinars, capacity development activities by the Voice of the Danube platform. And finally, and that's one of the key components, is capacity building, and Kati Schilling from IAWD will talk more about this component. So to sum up, we see that there's a continuous need for investments, institutional reform, and the development of capacities to improve access to water supply and sanitation services in the region. Interventions and strengthening actions are required at different levels, regional, national, and also local level. And a regional approach can help to strengthen partnerships, to build a community of knowledge in the region, and to share experiences and challenges are often common between countries. So the challenge one country has managed to overcome can be an important lesson learned for another country in the region. So to sum up, learning from each other can really help to achieve SDG 6 implementation, and we are happy to share this experience which we gained over the last 10 years. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Raymond Meyer, and you can be aware that for an association like IAWD, it is essential to have such a strong partner like the World Bank aside to deliver. Especially if it comes to governance and policies, the strength of the World Bank is much more visible to political decision makers in the Danube region than if just a technical scientific association would talk to decision makers. But it was also a learning process, as I can recall, for the World Bank, meant to be a program with a couple of years. It's now extending to 10 years, which we are working together, still ongoing over the next years. So lessons learned from both sides, but strong support and strong help for the side from the World Bank, especially if it comes to governance and policy issues. So thanks for this cooperation. And to now switch to the second component, I ask Kati Schilling, head of the IAWD Secretariat and Danube Water Program coordinator for IAWD, to give her presentation on enhancing capacities for improved service delivery in the Danube region. Kati, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Walter, for the kind introduction, and also good morning from my side. Unfortunately, Raymond already took the joke on the worm, but still, thank you for providing the context for the upcoming presentation with your presentation. Next slide, please. You have seen this slide already in Raymond's presentation. I'm just sharing it once again to highlight those activities where IAWD is involved within the Danube Water Program. It's partially benchmarking, it's knowledge sharing, and mainly the capacity building. Next slide, please. Given the time constraints today, I will only briefly touch upon the knowledge sharing. As you can see here, we have a couple of events ongoing. The most important, our annual regional event, being at the Danube Water Conference hosted in Vienna, or in even years, now also the Danube Water Forum hosted in the region as a main event to gather all participants, all stakeholders in the region's water sector together jointly. In addition, we have developed, due to COVID, a webinar series called the DWP Know Now webinar. It touches up-to-date topics and its impact on the Danube region. And the recent one we just had was addressing the revision of the EU Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive. In addition to that, we also have we do some communication efforts on our Voice of the Danube website, including social media. Next slide, please. Our main focus, as you have seen already and as you've heard already, is on capacity building. And in that regard, the so-called Danube Learning Partnership, DLEAP for short. And before I tell you about DLEAP and how it's work, I would like to emphasize one thing and to provide basically my key message of this presentation up front. And that is that we are convinced that DLEAP represents a unique game-changing model to address the capacity building needs of professional staff working in the water service sector. And this is why IWD has also committed to the Water Action Agenda to further advance the implementation of DLEAP in the region, but also to promote the expertise of DLEAP to other regions to achieve safe and reliable water services for all. Next slide, please. So, but why is this the case? Why are we so convinced of this model? First of all, I would like to tell you how DLEAP has evolved under the phase 1 of the Danube Water Program. So basically back in 2013, we realized that there is a strong unmet demand for high-quality capacity building programs. And so basically our members, mainly the national water associations, came to us and requested from us to develop regionally, on a regional level, a couple of training programs that they can deliver on a local, national level in their own language, and to also enrich the service portfolio for their members. And so this was how we created DLEAP, and it was then finally launched in 2017. Next slide, please. So let me briefly explain how DLEAP works, and I would like to touch on 4 key items. DLEAP uses the know-how of the private sector to develop training programs at the regional level. That means we, IWD, we work with well-known experts that we call our technical partners on the design and on the content of the training programs. Secondly, DLEAP strengthens the national water associations by training local experts to deliver the programs on national level and in local language. So how does that work? The national water associations, and we have 2 representatives here today, they identify suitable experts to be trained by our technical partners. In the second step, these trainers, they adjust the content of the training programs to their local need, to their local circumstances, and they deliver it in their respective country in local language, which is a key element of DLEAP. The first implementation of this delivery is then monitored and supervised by our technical partner to ensure sufficient quality. And national associations can establish several so-called hubs, which is like one for each program that they deliver. And you see on the slide a map of hubs that have been created over the last couple of years in the region. Third, DLEAP is based on the collection of participation fees to allow for sustainability. And I think this is a very critical element, especially for a region where for a long time people and utilities were used to get capacity building for free. So that means that the national water associations collect fees in order to run the programs on a cost recovery level. And fourth, DLEAP builds on a governance model that provides a shared ownership among the national water associations that are implementing a program. So in practical terms, that means DLEAP is formed as a committee of our association of IWD. It's governed by its members, the national water associations. They decide about the annual work program. They decide how to invest the fund. And in this context, I would also like to share that 20% of the participation fees that the associations are collecting are shared with IWD and DLEAP to cover the costs of operation and also to allow for the development of new training programs and hubs. Next slide, please. So just to share with you a little bit of information about the programs and the results. DLEAP delivers 3 main types of capacity building programs. Foundation programs, among them, for example, the utility benchmarking program to identify the issues within the utilities. Then the technical programs, for example, energy efficiency, non-revenue water, asset management, just to name a few. And finally, the implementation programs, for example, access to financing. These programs are typically delivered in a 6 to 9 month time frame, and they're designed based on learning by doing principles. That means they include a mix of physical training workshops followed by on-the-job training in which participating utilities go back home, they apply the tools and the techniques they have acquired to their particular situation, and they are finally developing concrete products. So since DLEAP implementation started in 2017, a number of achievements can be reported. 128 trainers have been trained in 25 training of trainers events. 20 hubs are serving 13 countries in the regions. 8 programs have been delivered, and 487 utilities have been trained. Next slide, please. So let me conclude my presentation on the one hand with a couple of impressions from DLEAP programs. You see people exchanging, people talking, people networking with each other. But let me also re-emphasize the key message that I delivered at the beginning of my presentation. We are convinced that the Danube Learning Partnership presents a unique game-changing model to address the capacity-building needs of professional staff working in the water service sector. And sharing the DLEAP expertise with other regions can contribute significantly to sustainable service delivery worldwide. Thank you.
Many thanks, Katharina Schilling, for your contributions and the insights on the capacity building activities which are here in the region. I'd like to go now into the region, and this means we need to have an understanding whether IWD only deals with the countries of the water catchment area. Well, since the World Congress in 2008, we call it Danube Plus. So we give every of the countries, and it's 19 countries who are sharing, have even a little part sharing of the Danube region. We give everyone a space to join us in the program, and therefore we invited 2 of those countries to join us today with their contributions and their insights on the participation in the Danube Water Program. The next presentation will come from the Aquasan president, Ms. Vesna Muslic. And Aquasan is the Association for Water and Environmental Protection in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And the presentation is about improving water services through capacity development in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Vesna, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Walter. Thank you, Walter. Good morning. It is really honor and pleasure for me to present you how we from Aquasan Network in Bosnia and Herzegovina contribute to the improvement of the water service sector in Bosnia and Herzegovina through capacity development. Next, please. A few words about Aquasan itself. We are the association of experts in the field of water supply and wastewater collection and treatment, gathering professionals, practitioners, decision makers from different ministries, from water agencies, environmental protection funds, water utilities, local governments, from academia, private sector. So all of those who can and who do with their knowledge and skills and competence, and as we always like to say, with their enthusiasm, contribute to the improvement of the water service sector in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And we do it through advocacy and lobbying for institutional and legislative and organizational improvements of the sector, through facilitating networking in the sector, promoting the sector, raising awareness about importance of this sector, and through capacity development. And why capacity development? In Bosnia and Herzegovina, but I might as well say in other countries in the Western Balkans and the entire region of Southeast Europe, capacity development is largely undermined. It is primarily because decision makers and managers do not necessarily recognize the importance of and the need for capacity development. It is also because unlike large infrastructure investments in capacity development are not immediately visible. It is also because recruitment process and employment process in the sector is more than often politically influenced, and therefore capacities are not high on a priority list when it comes to recruiting new staff or when it comes to evaluating performance of the existing staff and employees. Also, the work of people, the work of staff in this sector is not recognized as crucial for protecting public health and protecting environment. And the last but not least, in Bosnia and Herzegovina, capacity development is not legally regulated, and therefore it's a little bit not prioritized. So as a result, what we've had when we started before was that capacity development was coming only as accompanying measures to large infrastructure investments or as a sporadic initiatives. Next, please. So this is why we in ACOSA network in Bosnia and Herzegovina immediately recognized the opportunity which was offered through the Danube Water Program and Danube Learning Partnership and joined from the very beginning. So up to now we have set up and operating hubs for 4 DLEAP capacity development programs. And these are for non-revenue water, energy efficiency, asset management, and access to financing. Next, please. Here on this slide, you can see the map of Bosnia and Herzegovina with different dots representing different local governments and different water utilities, different DLEAP capacity development programs that we have implemented over the past period of time. And these are nice figures. These are very impressive figures for us. Next, please. But what these figures actually stand for, what they show us that by implementing all of these activities, we have managed to create momentum for capacity development. We have managed to create a critical mass of local governments and water utilities who are increasingly becoming aware and recognizing the benefits of investing in capacity development and participating in capacity development programs that are offered by ACWASAN through DLEAP or some other initiatives. It also means that we have started to change this negative downward spiral into positive upward spiral when it comes to development and changes in the sector. Next, please. I wanted to finish with a few photos so that you get a glimpse of how it looks like when we from ACOSA network in Bosnia and Herzegovina implement DLEAP capacity development programs. Here you can see photos from in-classroom sessions, from on-the-job trainings, from in-the-field trainings, from group work, from conferences, workshops. So all of these events which contributed not only to improving capacities in the sector, but also to creating trust in the sector and improving cooperation and communication amongst all stakeholders in the sector. Thank you.
Vesna, many thanks for these insights about the development in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Well, as I said before, there's several countries which are able to tell their water sector story, and we only had to pick 2 of them as an example for today's session. But be aware that these stories over those various countries, even those who are already part of the European Union, is interesting, and each of these countries tell their own custom-made story on the water sector. So for the next presentation, I invite Elisabetta Bocci, the Executive Director of SUKALP, which is the Water Supply and Sewage Association of Albania, for her presentation on the topic of advancing the Albanian water sector by supporting investments, cooperation, and policy. Elisabetta, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Walter, and it feels indeed a privilege to be here, actually, and to share the great work that we have collectively done these years under the Danube Water Program. So I feel it as a celebration. Next slide, please. I represent the Water Supply and Sewerage Association of Albania, also known as SUKALP, and we are a professional, non-governmental, member-based organization. We were established in 2000, and our members are mainly the water utilities in Albania, but also private sector members, academia, as well as professionals. Our overall mission objective as an organization has always been to contribute to improving the services of water supply and sanitation in Albania, and we do that through these four areas. We advocate the collective interests of our members. We serve as a leading resource for knowledge, professional development, and networking. We build awareness and attract future generations to seek a career in the water sector, and we are a keen believer in partnerships, in building partnerships, and that explains a lot, our journey with the Danube Water Program, and that's why we love it here. Next slide, please. Now, it has been really hard to pack 10 years of a journey into 5 minutes or 5 slides, but I have picked just some highlights of this great journey, in fact, and I would like to share them with you. The Danube Water Program, as we know, it's not a typical investment project. However, it has built and created the ground for investment projects in Albania. We have a very recent one, just recently launched, the Albanian National Water Supply and Sanitation Sector Modernization Program. It is jointly financed by the World Bank and SECO, and it is a program that will focus a lot on investments, improving the sector by bringing the so needed investments in Albania, but also it will focus a lot on technical assistance and along with that capacity development that we heard about. The program is very timely because Albania is in probably the most significant water sector reform over the last 30 years. Next slide, please. The core objective of this reform is to aggregate the water service providers from 58 water companies into 15 regional water companies in an effort to bring efficiencies in the sector, improve performance, and as a consequence, improve the services to the customers. In addition, in 2018, the government of Albania took a very bold move, I would say, and set an example in the region by establishing an institutionalized national training and test-based certification program. The objective of this initiative is to train and raise the professional skills of the operational staff of water utilities in the country. Now, you might ask, why do you show this? Well, yes, these are actions by the government of Albania. However, the Danube Water Program, through its Danube Water Conference, other events and other activities, has served as a platform where these ideas they were initially ideas, they were discussed, but then they built up and they were developed into the actions that we see in the sector today. Next slide, please. I will not stop here, but I cannot not mention that we are also a beneficiary of DLEAP, and we contribute, which contributes a lot to the offer to our water utilities. And these are just some of the programs that we are implementing in Albania and offering to our member water utilities. Next one, please. This is the slide that you saw. It's a great picture, actually, very colorful and happy people in it. It's a very fresh one as well, and it was the first activity that we all did in the region right after the COVID. We had the pleasure to host and co-organize the Danube Water Forum last year in Tirana. We were happy to welcome, actually, over 200 participants from the region who joined us to discuss and exchange best practices around the topic of energy, which is very timely. We are in this global crisis of energy and economical. From our perspective as an association, we took this as a sign of maturity of our engagement in the Danube Water Program. We took it with humbleness, but also with a sense of pride and ownership of the great community that we have jointly contributed to create in the region. Next one, please. And this is my last but favorite slide. Danube Water Program has continuously had an eye on young water professionals. And this is just one of the activities where a group, the group that you see here, was able to participate last year at the Danube Water Forum through the support of the Danube Water Program. But the program has done so much more than that. The program has allowed space for these young professionals to speak, to present, but also to take a proper engagement by running panels and moderating or co-moderating the sessions of the conference. I will conclude just with a commitment which is clear that, of course, we look forward to continuing this fourth phase of the Danube Water Program and to maximizing whatever we have built so far and to making it stronger, looking ahead into the future. And of course, we will be around after the Danube Water Program will be over, unfortunately, but we will be here to continue everything that we have created and to take it further and, yeah, to make use of it and, yeah, to bring value. So thank you very much for your attention.
Many thanks, Elisabeth. And this concludes the first part of our session here today. And let me make one remark, and this is about the gender balance. We didn't even manage to have a nice gender balance here on the panel. I think you and Vesna are one of the strong examples in the Danube region that women can take strong leadership in the water sector, in the positions to lead the water sector in your respective countries. And we are proud about this, to have the gender balance not only written in statutes, but some experience which we can show. And in particular, when we come to the young water professionals, we see that this growing gender balance is really one of the strengths of the water sector which we are facing. With that, I just come to the second part of our session here, and this is the panel for discussion and questions. And in this respect, I'd like to welcome on my side Gustavo Saltiel from the World Bank. Gustavo is the global lead for water supply and sanitation and water global practice in the World Bank. So as you are the last one now to speak, I come up with my first question to you for the panel discussion now. And Gustavo, could you tell us what are the main challenges in other parts of the world? Could you please briefly summarize the activities of the World Bank in this respect and related to the Danube Water Program as well?
Of course, and thank you, Walter. Thanks to the Austrian Federal Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry, Regions and Water Management for the invitation and organization of this side event. Also would like to take the opportunity to thank Austria for the long-standing partnership with the World Bank for the Danube Water Program, of course, but also Austria's participation in the Global Water Security and Sanitation Partnership, a very important program of the World Bank. Also, congratulations to the government of Austria, of course, and all the riparians, Albania and Bosnia-Herzegovina and the other riparians for the IWD, because this is a great example. And thanks, Walter, for the detailed history of the program over the last 30 years. It's very telling. I think it's, I wanted to highlight, because I know the program, of course, but I didn't know so many details, and how important it was. Looking, in my role as global lead, I work with different regions of the World Bank, and this is an example of cooperation. And in your narrative, Walter, about the evolution of the program and what motivated the government of Austria to create the program with other neighboring countries in a different world in the early 90s, shows the results of cooperation in terms of development. The efforts are paying back. Efforts to bring the countries together, as you said, with different backgrounds, different cultures, different levels of development, some of them coming back from the previous Soviet Union bloc, to join the European Commission, different cultures, different systems, administration, etc., to bring all these countries together around the objective of improving the management of water around the Danube, but also improving the management of the water and sanitation sector, the utilities, is commendable. And this is for us, again, in my role as global lead, working with different regions, is a very important example also for others. I think it's a time, we discussed this with Raymond a few times before, we need to do better, we need to do more in terms of sharing the experience of the IWD and the Danube Water Program and the cooperation with other regions. To give you an example, yesterday, in the context of the UN conference, the World Bank organized a high-level meeting with ministers of water from 20 countries in East and Southern Africa. We are launching, together with partners, an initiative for universal access to water supply and sanitation in Eastern and Southern Africa. It will be extended soon to the whole continent for achieving universal access to safely manage water and sanitation services, SDG 6.1 and 6.2. The countries came together for the first time around this initiative that we call Systems Change for Achieving Universal Access. And these are the first steps of these countries in building a platform like this. In this case, the glue would not be a river like the Danube, it would be the common objective to achieve universal access. But there is a lot, even though the context is very different, Europe from Africa, what I think they can learn from the Danube Water Program and the IWD is how you gradually, through cooperation, training, sharing lessons, learning, DLEAP is a fantastic example. You build trust, you build capacity, you share lessons, one learns from the other. I think this is a great example. The countries came together for the first time, I mean, in the context of this initiative, of course. It will be followed by a series of events in the World Bank, in the spring meetings of the World Bank, but also in Africa. And I will use this example in the presentations to share with it. Yes, so I stop here, and there will be another question, I'm sure, later on. Thank you, Walter.
Okay, well, thank you, Gustavo. And I think there's a lot to be told about this story of the Danube region. So I would like to shift my question to, as I said, the countries, back to Bosnia and Herzegovina, because each of those countries tells their own story of the water sector, and this makes the Danube region so interesting. We always call it internationally a laboratory situation, which we have in the Danube region, because we need to manage this cooperation of a big number of countries together in the region. So Vesna, what are the lessons learned from the Danube Water Program implementation in your country, Bosnia and Herzegovina?
There are so many lessons learned from all of these activities that we have implemented, but I would definitely like to point two of them. The first one is that capacity development is a long process, and it does take a lot of effort for many different reasons. But one of the main reasons is that despite evident lack of institutional, individual, organizational capacities in the sector, still those who are deciding whether their water utility or their local government will join a particular capacity development program, they are still not embracing all of these opportunities offered through the Danube Water Program, through the DLEAP and other initiatives. So there is so much more to be done in that regard to keep raising this awareness, so that we start shift moving towards the philosophy that whole life learning is a principle that needs to be part of every corporate development of each and every institution. The second lesson learned is that investments in capacity development do pay off. People do come to training, they acquire new knowledge, new skills, They go back to their workplaces. They start applying these new technologies, new approaches, new methodologies, new work procedures, and all of that does result in a better operational performance, better financial performance, and altogether in a better sustainability of water services. So in short, capacity development is a long process. It does take a lot of effort, but it definitely pays off.
Well, thank you, Vesna. This is the perspective on Bosnia and Herzegovina. We need to be equal. So the question as well goes to Elisabetta Pocci from Albania. What are your main lessons learned from the Danube Water Program implementation in your country, Albania?
Yes, a few, but I'll try to stick to two probably. I will go back to this, the network that we have created, the community. It's not just a network. Network we have plenty, but this is a community. We don't have to figure out everything on our own. I mean, there are people who did it before us and did it well, or maybe did not succeed. There are lessons to be learned in both cases, and this is what the Danube Water Program offers. I still remember when we started the program 10 years ago, we were sitting in the first meeting, and with a very few exceptions of people who I knew in that room, the rest were totally unknown to me. And today, that has completely changed. And I know that those people are just one phone call away. If I have a question on anything, if I inquire about how they do something in their country, I know that they are easily to reach. And I think, I mean, this community of people, of professionals that the Danube Water Program has created is something quite unique that we did not know we would get in the beginning when the program was established. And maybe in the same lines, but slightly different. This is, of course, Danube Water Program has clear objectives. It is about the water sector, improving the water sector. However, coming from a region that has been in conflicts and recent conflicts, and those conflicts seem to come up from time to time. I think the Danube Water Program has really contributed to making us better people to each other. I mean, it's good to know the neighbors and to understand that we have more things in common than we have things that separate us. So it has really improved that mutual understanding, I would say, also in the region.
Well, thank you, Elisabetta. And I think we need to take advantage of the capacity and the profound knowledge which we have present here with Gustavo from the World Bank. And we came to New York to show our example and how this relates to SDG 6. So back to you, Gustavo. What are your main messages and recommendations for supporting the water sector in other regions and to accelerate the SDG 6 implementation?
Thank you, Walter. The main messages that we have in terms of acceleration to achieve SDG 6.1 and 6.2 in particular are consistent with the activities you are supporting under the Danube Water Program. So one, on what we call policies, institutions, and regulation, PIR. Why we have this approach is not only about regulation, not only about institutions or policy reforms. It's a coordinated approach across these three dimensions, because what we have learned, including from activities supported by the World Bank and our own operations, is that when you tackle one of them in isolation of the other two, results are suboptimal. When you support reforms and do not intervene at the policy or institutional architecture level, you may achieve some progress, but not full progress. So PIR, policies, institutions, and regulation, governance in a comprehensive manner. That's one. And that also includes something very important in the Danube region as well, which is the national, subnational coordination. Oftentimes, the World Bank engages only with national governments, but national governments, of course, they have the resources, financing, but they do not operate the services. So that coordination is very important. So that's one. Second, of course, and this is an area of strength of the Danube Water Program is utility reform. And there are so many activities here, and with such good results, as demonstrated by Elisabetta and Vesna, that this is another good example. Transforming the utilities so that the utilities can become credit-worthy by improving efficiency. They can go to the markets, they can obtain their own financing. So that's second, on utilities. Third, on financing. Resources from the multilateral, bilateral development banks, as well as governments, need to be used in a more effective and efficient manner. It's not only about putting money for any infrastructure investment, it's about using the money to create incentives. Create incentives for performance, create incentives for providing more water to more people. Four, again at the core, at the heart of the Danube Water Program, integrated water resources management. A lot has been said. I don't need to say much about integrated water resources management, but the World Bank has launched recently an initiative for positioning or repositioning storage. Storage as a key element for adaptation and building resilience to climate change. So storage and integrated water resources management is the fourth. And the fifth, again, good example from Danube, is collaboration platforms. There are so many people intervening in different countries, and it's very important to coordinate and collaborate, not only among donors, among bilaterals and multilaterals, but also, and I think both Elisabetta and Vesna referred to this, collaboration and coordination among the different actors at the national level, that oftentimes that doesn't happen. So these are our 5 points, what I wanted to highlight. Walter, thank you. Over to you.
Well, thank you, Gustavo. And with that, I would make a quick look through the audience. And if there is an interest to pose a question to the panel from your side, I see one sign of a question. So please introduce yourself first and then just come up with your question.
Good morning. My name is Peter Dane from the European Benchmarking Cooperation. First of all, my congratulations with 10 years of existence of the program. I think this morning we heard a lot about what the program is like, all the efforts to reach out to water companies in the region to support them with capacity building. And I think capacity building itself is key to improve the water services. But what I missed a little bit in the stories is the real results in terms of reaching SDG 6. So can you explain a little bit more what happened during this 10 years in terms of access to the water services, reduction of non-revenue water, and especially the investment levels in the region?
Okay, I just see that we have a second question as well. We take both questions together and then just find a quick reply. Please introduce yourself.
First of all, congratulations for the organization of the event and the ideas. My name is Mariano Blanco. I'm from Aqualia, a successful water Spanish company, and I'm here representing also EURO, the European Federation of the Water and Sewage National Associations. I would like to point out the necessity of innovation. One pillar of our commitment is to promote innovation. In fact, Euro has created an European innovation platform as a liaison point for water operators and national associations in order to stimulate research and be at the forefront of the sector. So my question is about this issue. I think innovation is a key pillar for advance in all water and sewage management. Nowadays is in fashion the digitalization, the management of the data, and another important issue is the transparency. So I think I would like to hear you about innovation and in relation with data management and transparency for the sector. Thank you.
Okay, just for the answer on both of the questions, I first refer to Raimund Meyer, and then also Gustavo want to give a short reply on both of the questions. Raimund?
Thank you very much, Walter. I think I refer first to the first question, which was raised on the progress achieved. The program is now in place since 10 years, and when you look at the results indicators which were set up from the program, basically all have been achieved. And they were very much on trainings, capacity building, on specific advisory services provided, etc. Now, how does this translate into real figures in terms of pollution reduction? I think I mentioned in the beginning in my intervention that we see from the monitoring systems also that pollution is reduced in the basin, mainly because of the significant investments in infrastructure, which was taken particularly also in the non-EU countries. What we also have ongoing is like specific investment projects, and these were also to some extent triggered because of the cooperation which was set up in the frame of the Danube program in particular countries. Like Elisabetta mentioned, one new investment operation in Albania. We have also activities ongoing in Bosnia-Herzegovina. We also work in other countries. So I think when you look at the figures, how it translates into real figures when you monitor the pollution reduction, this requires, of course, investments. But what we can do in the frame of a program, and we have to be realistic about this, is preparing these grounds that these investments can happen, first of all. And second, also that once the investments are done, that also operation and maintenance can happen. Because we see in a number of countries that despite investments are made, operation maintenance is often lagging. And here we are back to the topic of capacity building, because it's really important to have strong utilities, to have capacities in order to maintain and operate really this infrastructure. Thank you.
Well, second answer from Gustavo, and at the end of this session, I need to ask everyone to be brief, even with the answer. Gustavo?
So since Raimund has responded more on the issues related to access and improvements in the Danube, I will focus on Mariano's question. And absolutely, Mariano, and I should have mentioned when I described the priorities of the World Bank, innovation is critical. And this is across the 5 dimensions that I mentioned, but in terms of universal access to water and sanitation, what we are seeing across the world is that innovations help many countries to do what we call leapfrogging. So they can, through technology, for instance, in terms of non-revenue water reduction, the progress is impressive that we see in many countries. And the same with the new technologies on desalination and wastewater reuse, yes. So by all means, innovation is critical. Thank you. I can speak forever about innovation, but I need to be brief. Thank you, Walter.
Okay, well, time goes quick, and to tell the whole Danube story, 1 hour and 50 minutes is not a long time. So with that, we come to the closing remarks of this session here at the United Nations headquarters, and I ask Katharina Schilling to give us a wrap-up and conclusions on today's meeting.
Yeah, thank you, Walter, for the moderation and also for providing me the opportunity to conclude this session and also to provide my personal or to share my personal experience, and I'll try to be quick. Today's objective was to highlight the Danube Water Program as a lighthouse example to improve water and sanitation services. So you have seen a couple of presentations, you have heard our panelists, but did we really manage to showcase to you what the program has done? Out of curiosity, I visited that place to go at this stage to see if the program has achieved what we have promised, and that was ChatGPT. So I asked if, have we achieved? And just to name a few of the responses I got, the Danube Water Program has provided support to policy and regulatory reforms, improvements to the efficiency and effectiveness of water and sanitation services, capacity building focused on improving skills, etc., etc. So all those points are really relevant, and almost all of them were touched upon in the presentations that you heard today. From my personal point of view, ChatGPT did not realize one very critical thing, probably given its artificial nature, and that's the importance of people and the investment into people and the relationship with each other. So the Danube Water Program was able to create a collaborative environment a community of practice in the region, and almost a water family, which builds on respect and trust. And to our experience, the exchange between the different levels of stakeholders is a precondition for sustainable service provision. Moreover, the success of the program also relies on a very fruitful cooperation between the World Bank and IWD, a regional water association, and its members, above all the national water associations. And the latter are responsible to ensure the legacy of the program's initiatives by translating the achievements from a regional level down to the specific national environment. So to conclude, I'm convinced that the program has proven to be a lighthouse example, and that the expertise created does not only serve our region, but can also be replicated to other regions in the world to accelerate safe, reliable, and affordable access to water services for all. And at this stage, let me thank the Austrian Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry, Regions and Water Management, not only for hosting this event as a lead partner, but also for its commitment to the Water Action Agenda. Finally, I would like to thank the speakers and the panelists, and above all, the audience, in person or virtually, for joining our side event. So thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Welcome on my pleasure. Really, thank you for inviting me, and also thank you. Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.